The two texts discussed in this presentation are Miranda July's short story, The Man on the Stairs, and William Shakespeare's Macbeth. The woman who narrates The Man on the Stairs and Lady Macbeth have a lot in common. Specifically, the suspenseful awakening scene that begins the July short story and Lady Macbeth's sleepwalking scene from Act 5 of the play are similar. Both possess tension and a dreamlike quality, in which images, thoughts, and hallucinations of death are described. As the audience, one cannot be sure whether everything being described is real, but raw, undeniable truths are nevertheless being revealed by the characters as the tension builds. One can also view them through a feminist lens and see that these women both have regrets about the paths they've taken and the male partners they've ended up with. The first connection is Imagery of Death. We can speculate that both of these women are obsessed with death and are perhaps hoping for it. We don't know if the man on the stairs is real. Maybe he is a death wish or a desire to escape. The woman is unhappy in her relationship and fantasizes about the man holding, quote, a gun at her head, or a knife at her heart, or a rope around her neck, or a heavy rock over her chest. For her part, Lady Macbeth talks about the smell of blood and how her hands will never be clean. She proclaims hell is murky, perhaps knowing that she's about to go to hell herself. The woman in the July story ends her narrative by saying, I would rather die than laugh. But I died. I did die. This is probably a metaphor, but both women are consumed by the idea of death itself, and that imagery comes through clearly in the stories they tell. Another point of connection is the tension and suspense in both scenes, which is built up throughout as a method of development. In The Man on the Stairs, the tension first comes from not knowing whether the man is real or just a fantasy in the narrator's mind. The man seems real as the narrator describes his slow ascent up the stairs. Quote, he was walking up in the slowest possible way. He had all the time in the world for this. My God, did he have time. End quote. However, the woman also details many past events and regrets and says, the man on the stairs was the total opposite of me. Maybe the woman wishes she were different. Maybe she wants to end the charade of her life. Maybe the man is just a projection of her unhappiness. This reminds me of Lady Macbeth's regrets when she laments, what's done cannot be undone. The tension in her sleepwalking scene comes from dramatic irony. The audience knows the truth and watches in horror as Lady Macbeth tells all her secrets. This differs from the Miranda July story because in that story, we're not sure what the truth is, and the tension comes from trying to uncover what is real from an unreliable narrator. As for the feminist lens, in brief, one can look at how both women are portrayed. Both Lady Macbeth and the unnamed woman are initially presented as strong, but by the end they have been reduced to stereotypes of unsure or passive victims of their own circumstances. The Lady Macbeth that was first seen in the play, calling on evil spirits and planning the murder of the king, is a far cry from this blubbering and sick woman destined to die alone. Lady Macbeth ended up being lied to and abandoned by her husband, but is nevertheless punished for everything that happened, with no chance of redemption. Whether or not she deserves redemption is another discussion, but it's clear that she is marginalized, is ultimately defined mainly by her connection to her husband, and like Eve in the Garden of Eden, is the source of original sin in the play. The woman in the Miranda July story has a more subtle and modern story arc. Manipulated by an older man and now unhappy to be with him, she seems to be screaming for an escape from her life and is unable to find one, except for imagining an extreme scenario like a murderer in her house. Like a person who is depressed and may fantasize about sacrificing themselves to save other people as a noble exit out of life, this woman is imagining another life she could have had if she hadn't gone out with Kevin that night a long time ago. She says, quote, my eyes are open too. Kevin's eyes are shut. He is so far away, and he always will be. Lady Macbeth and this woman both seem powerful at first, but that power is constantly undercut by these unimpressive men in their lives, and now they can't escape them. Like many an unhappy marriage, these women seem destined to see it through to the bitter end, and the only other option is death, which they seem to be obsessed with for a reason.